Welcome to this explainer. Okay, I want you to take whatever shiny, gladiator-filled image you have in your head of ancient Rome right now and just set it aside. Today, we're going to trade the glittering, pristine marble of the Forum and the soaring columns of the Senate for something entirely different. We are going to explore the dusty, repetitive, and surprisingly exhausting reality of a Roman legionary. It's a world where the day-to-day existence was just a grueling slog of physical labor and endurance.
Okay, let's dive into this. When we think of Rome, our minds immediately go straight to the cinematic chaos of a battlefield, right? The screaming, the dramatic clashing of bronze, all those glorious charges. But for the average Roman soldier, life was about 99% walking and maybe just 1% of everything else. Seriously, that whole cinematic battlefield chaos thing, it's largely a myth compared to this staggering daily statistic. Your life was totally defined by the march, not the melee.
And because of that reality, we arrive at this fundamental truth. Your biggest enemy out there on the wild edges of the empire, it wasn't some fierce barbarian warrior charging at you. No, it was a blister. It was the biting cold. It was the sheer, unrelenting physical toll of your own gear and your environment. Honestly, the constant, nagging threat of exposure and just bodily wear and tear was vastly more dangerous and omnipresent than any enemy army. Let's move to and see how this builds. Part 1, the Dawn Awakening, the birding. So imagine waking up at dawn in some muddy, rain-soaked province at the very edge of the civilized world. You're not reaching for a sword to start your day. No way. You're reaching for something much, much heavier. 60. I really want that number to just sink in for a second. 60 pounds. That's the sheer physical weight of the gear a legionary had to literally hoist onto their own body before a single sword was drawn or shield was raised. It is an immense burden to bear right at the literal crack of dawn, and it sets a really punishing tone for the entire day. And that weight? It came primarily in the form of what the Romans called a sarcina. Basically, this was a heavy pack carried on a wooden pole balanced directly over the shoulder. And let me be clear, this was absolutely no modern, padded, ergonomic hiking backpack. No, this was a punishing, awkward, rigid load that constantly dug into your collarbone with every single step you took. You practically spent your whole day just trying to figure out how to shift this stupid pole so it would stop bruising your shoulder. So what exactly was making that sarcina so incredibly heavy? Well, you were lugging around a cooking pot, a saw, a heavy spade for digging, and of course, your daily rations. Most notably, grain. And that grain was used to make this lumpy porridge that would essentially sit in your stomach like a damp brick. So not only are you carrying all that physical weight on your back, you're carrying that heavy, unappetizing meal right in your gut. And this brilliantly illustrates the true nature of the job. You weren't really just a warrior. You were basically a heavily armed UPS driver. But imagine being a delivery driver who, at the very end of their exhausting route, had to build their own warehouse completely from scratch every single night before they could even think about resting. That was the reality of the burden you carried from dawn.
Moving on to part 2, the midday slog, the rhythm.
Right, so once the camp was packed up, the real rhythm of the day truly began. It was just this grueling sensory loop of unwashed wool tunics pressing in on you, dust kicking up into your eyes and lungs, and, the quiet, dry-witted grumbling of the soldier walking right behind you. And the soundtrack to all that endurance, it definitely wasn't an epic orchestral score playing from the heavens. It was the sound of your caligae. These were the heavy leather sandals worn by the legionaries. The true sound of the Roman Empire expanding wasn't shouting. It was the dusty, repetitive thud of thousands of these leather sandals striking the stones of a Roman road in absolute perfect unison. To maintain that perfect unison, the legion relied heavily on the tympanum. This was a frame drum that beat out a steady, hypnotic pulse for the march. Just thud, thud, thud. It completely locked everyone into a shared cadence. That drum beat kept the soldiers moving, pushing through the agonizing pain in their feet and the digging of that sarcina pole into their shoulders. It was literally the relentless heartbeat of the march. So the crucial point is, how far did that heartbeat actually carry them? 20 miles. Yep, that is the actual distance these heavily burdened men marched every single day. Look, walking 20 miles in a day is a massive achievement for a modern hiker with ultralight, high-tech gear. Doing it in an itchy wool tunic, in leather caligae, carrying 60 pounds of pots, pans, and tools, all while digesting lumpy porridge, That is a truly staggering feat of daily human endurance.
Which brings us to part 3, the afternoon engineering, the theater of war.
Okay, let's say the march is actually interrupted and the legion encounters an enemy. Roman combat, especially siege warfare, really wasn't framed around glorious individual dueling. Not at all. It was all about the meticulous optimization of the physics of destruction. Honestly, think of Roman engineers as the overcaffeinated IT guys of the ancient world. When they arrived at a hostile city, they didn't just blindly run at the stone walls screaming. They became highly specialized construction workers. But instead of fixing your Wi-Fi, these ancient IT guys were out there building monumental, terrifying siege weapons right outside your city gates. One of their absolute masterpiece creations was the Ares. This was a massive battering ram suspended by thick chains inside this wheeled wooden shelter. Operating it was pure psychological theater. It swung like a slow-motion hammer from the heavens, creating this deep, rhythmic thunk of wood against stone that literally vibrated through the very bones of the defenders trapped inside. The whole goal was to convince the enemy that their massive walls were just temporary obstacles in the face of Roman engineering. And this relentless engineering mindset, it didn't stop at the shoreline. Let's look at the Corvus. So the Romans were famously pretty terrible at sailing, right? So how do you win a naval war when you literally can't sail? Well, you invent a heavy boarding bridge with a massive metal spike on the end of it. When an enemy ship got close enough, you just dropped this gigantic piece of wood onto their deck with a massive crashing thud.
Now, what's really interesting about this is the sheer practicality of the tactic. Instead of trying to outmaneuver an enemy ship using traditional, complex sailing tactics, which, again, they knew they were bad at, they just dropped a bridge and locked the ships together. By doing this, they instantly turned a highly complex sea battle into a brutal, land-style brawling match. It's the ultimate Roman solution. If you don't like the rules of the game, just use raw engineering and a really heavy piece of wood to completely change them.
And that leads us to part 4, the nightly grind, the camp. So here is the great paradox of the Romans' log. You have just finished marching 20 exhausting miles. You are utterly depleted. But you are about to face even more exhausting manual labor. Every single evening required these rigid, non-negotiable steps. Step 1, dig a ditch. Step 2, build a defensive wall. Only then could you reach step 3, huddle in a tent with 7 other men. Repeating this back-breaking manual labor every single night, completely regardless of how safe the territory seemed, wasn't just about strategy. It was a product of the absolute Roman obsession with order and discipline. In that tent? Yeah, it wasn't exactly a luxury suite. Cramming yourself and 7 other unwashed, exhausted soldiers into a tiny leather tent created what we can only beautifully describe as a human lasagna of sweaty comrades. It's a hilarious yet painfully relatable modern analogy for their cramped, suffocating sleeping arrangements after a long, hard day in the mud. But get this, even while you were trying to somehow find sleep in that human lasagna, the camp IT department was still hard at work. Soldiers had to reassemble portable catapults and ballistas that had been broken down on carts for the day's march. Tools had to be meticulously sharpened, and in the background, you'd hear the rhythmic scratching of a scribe's quill, meticulously recording grain shipments and issuing official decrees. The machine of Rome literally never slept, even when the men desperately wanted just a single moment without aching feet or sandy porridge. By the time these men finally closed their eyes, they weren't dreaming of the glory of the empire. They just wanted relief. But why does all this matter to us today? Why study this log? Because, as one historian captured perfectly, these exhausted men were the architects of a world that refused to give in to the wild. Their daily endurance, their blisters and their endless ditches built the literal roads we still walk on today, and they established the very foundation of the legal codes we still use. Which brings us to a final thought for you to chew on. Does understanding the grueling, repetitive, everyday slog of these completely nameless soldiers change how you view the grand monuments of history they left behind? History isn't just made of marble and gold. It's made of sweat, blisters, and 20-mile marches. I hope this explainer gave you a totally new lens to view the past. Keep questioning the myths, and I'll see you next time as we uncover more fascinating realities hiding right beneath the surface.